So my name is Greg Busch. I'm a producer from Columbus, North Dakota. I've been operating a farm since 1980. I've been no-tilling for over 30 years, and I've seen a lot of improvements over the years, and they've come slowly but incrementally, and we're really enjoying what we do. I'm going to talk about our journey through restorative ag and how our mission has always been to leave the land better than where we started, and as we've progressed through this, we're finding just all the different things that we can do, and just how far we can take this back to being restored to what the native prairies once were. I think we've been in the status quo for just too long, and we really need to protect our soils, to protect them from wind erosion and get the biology of the soil functioning the way it once did. Yeah, so a couple months ago when Darrell Oswald, as Jay Fear would call him, the Oswald boy, when Darrell had contacted me about speaking before this conference, I said, well, Darrell, what have I got to offer? I mean, everybody that's going to be here is doing the same thing I'm doing. And he said, no, Greg, that isn't true. He said, we want to get a farmer's perspective on this. And how could I say no to a guy like Darrell? He's been so generous with his time. He's spoken a number of times up in our corner of the state. And this last summer, we took a tour bus, about 50 people, to the Minokan farm. And he was a very gracious host, so here I am. Being on a stage is not something I've ever been a dream of mine. It's probably been more of a nightmare of mine. I won't get into the details of the nightmare, but my comfort zone tends to be leaning against the box of a pickup with 5 or 6 of my good buddies. I've got a tiling spade in one hand and probably a cold beer in the other, and we're looking at a field and talking about soil health. So when I came up with a title for my talk, Restorative Ag, you know, we've heard of soil stewardship and sustainable ag and regenerative ag and the soil health movement. And when I started farming all those years ago, my mission was to leave the land at least as good or better than when I started. But as time went on, I could see I could do a lot better than that. The technology is with us now, and I felt that if I could get that soil restored to what the prairies were, that's my mission. And so, as Emily said, I'm from Columbus, North Dakota. We're about 2 miles from the Canadian border and about 50 from Montana. You heard Morgan talk yesterday about where his farm is at. We're about 5 miles away. If you look, he says he's at the end of the earth. We're somewhere like maybe the middle of nowhere on the end of the earth. But you see the little airplane up in the corner there. That's where Morgan's farm is, and I'm pretty sure that's where he keeps his Learjet. So I'm not sure why that's on there. But so this is a photo of my family and I. My wife Jessica and I operate the farm. We have 2 grown daughters, Kelsey, who is a school teacher from Williston, and Laurel, who's an occupational therapist from Grand Forks, and I'm very proud of my family. So a little bit about our operation. Began operation in 1980. We were pretty typical for the area, wheat fallow system. So in 1987, we moved into no-till with our farm. And in 1992, we started to add more diversity to it. Saw good things happening all along. Started growing cover crops in 2010. And we just the last 2 years, we've been doing some companion cropping. And we don't own any livestock, and so we've had limited livestock impact, but we have worked with the Jacobs family to do some fall grazing on our land. So over and over, you've heard the 5 principles of soil health. They aren't in any specific order, I guess. I just listed them in the order that I've been able to address them, adding no-till and, again, diversity in the crops and cover crops to keep a living root out there as long as possible, and, of course, keeping armor on the soil, and we're just beginning to integrate livestock. So, flashback to 1987. I started with a degraded soil, and that really wasn't my grandpa's fault. It really wasn't my dad's fault. They worked with the technology that they were afforded in those days. In fact, in 1978, my dad was about a year away from retirement, and he did a trial with an 80-acre field doing no-till. And I was the one who was the naysayer. I said, "Dad, you can't do that. That's going to look like hell." And he said, "Well, I don't care." He said, let's just see what it does. And it wasn't a great success, but it was a success. It worked. And so our soils were probably 1 to 1.5% organic matter. We were constantly drying out in the summers. We were seeing wind erosion and water erosion, and we weren't profitable. So we started no-tilling. It was pretty simplistic management. We were sticking pretty much to cereal grains. We were using way too much fertilizer. And we were making more money, but we still weren't very profitable. The other thing was we kind of plateaued. We did see good things happening from that, but our organic matter plateaued at about 2.5%. So in 1992, we started to add more diversity, and field peas were a big part of that. And there were 2 individuals from Divide County that I credit us to starting at least down this path with the field peas. One is Keith Brown, he's here, and the other is Dick Rowland. I think he was here yesterday. And so as we started to add more diversity, we started to see that organic matter creep up and more good things happening to our soils, more earthworms, better soil structure. So over the years, we've grown probably 20 different crops. We don't grow 20 different crops every year, and I think my wife appreciates that. We do grow probably 8 to 10 different crops in a given year. We have more of the cool season type crops than what we do warm season. That's typical for the area we live in. We do have some broadleaf, warm season broadleafs that we're able to work with. Corn and millet have been a bit of a struggle for us, but I hope to continue to keep trying some of those. And then the last 2 years, we've been doing some companion cropping with peas and canola and chickpeas and flax. And then also, with a little less success, a red clover underseed. So in 2010, we wanted more diversity, more time to keep a crop growing in our fields, so we started adding cover crops. Currently, our organic matter is starting to approach 4%. Not all of it's at 4%, but a good part of it is. This particular field was seeded this last fall after harvest, field of peas. And September of 2019 was just a wonderful time to get a cover crop to grow. It wasn't very good for harvest, but as far as getting a cover crop established, we were really happy with the things that we saw on the soils. We'd get a couple inches of rain, and we'd maybe see a little surface water for a little while, but a day or so, and it would soak in, and the fields adjacent to it just stood with water all fall. We've seen our best success in cover crops in preventive plant years, at least from a top growth from the volume that we see in those years. But if we can get in, I don't know, the first half of August or so, we'll see enough growth on those after harvest cover crop fields. You know, I guess They tell me size doesn't matter. As long as we've got something growing out there, we've got some sugars going back into the biology of the soil, it's all a positive thing. We do struggle some falls with it being too dry to establish a decent cover, but you know, we just have to keep trying. And I try to keep a fairly diverse cover crop rotation, probably 5 to 7 different species. I try not to put too much money into it. Usually after harvest, I'll open up the seed bins and, well, we got some oats, we got some flax, and maybe some leftover sunflowers or something. And we'll have to buy certain species for the cover crop mix, but usually try to have some radishes and turnips and clover. And this particular photo, there was even some vetch in. Just this fall, we started adding rye as a cover crop, and I'm kind of excited to work with that. I've been a little bit concerned about having rye on the farm because I like to grow oats. General Mills, when I was growing for General Mills, they didn't really want to see us have rye anywhere on the farm. I'm hoping they'll change their tune on that a little bit as long as we give a couple years time to get that rye out of the way. I think any of the broadleaf crops will work well after fall rye. Like I said, the last 2 years we've been growing companion crops. Chickpea flax was one that we were told was an easy one to work with, and we had really good luck with it in 2018. The two crops grow together really well and they form a nice synergy with each other. 2019, not so much. Morgan Jacobs had talked yesterday about his troubles with the chickpea flax, and mine were the same. We had a lot of shatter, a lot of molding. So what we chose to do was to just use the stripper head, go in there and just take what flax we could get. And I wouldn't say it was a total failure because really the flax we took off wasn't that much poorer than the flax that was raised as a monocrop. If you notice in the photo, and this one is mine, Morgan had his photos, it's like, do farmers ever wash their hands? Oh my gosh. So we've had greater success with our peas and canola. The first year we grew yellow peas with Clearfield canola. The problem was that the canola matured later than the peas, and we had some shatter on those. So in 2019, we grew maple peas. That's the brown peas you see in the photo. And they're purple flowered, tall vining type pea, grow about 4 feet tall. When you grow them alone, they're horrible to harvest. The canola did a really nice job of propping those up. It kind of trellised around it. And there was a nice synergy because the peas were providing nitrogen for the canola. We don't use any fertilizer, and we've really had good luck. So there's always going to be some advantages and disadvantages with the companion crops. I like adding more diversity. We're making better use of that soil, better use of the sunlight. Potentially, we see a higher yield. Both years, I think we probably have done better than peas or canola alone. And then, of course, the reduction in fertilizer and chemical. We haven't been using any fertilizer with any of the cover crops. We did do about a 20-acre trial with sulfur just to see if the canola would respond, but we really didn't see any response. And then as far as the chemical, we've just been using a grass herbicide, and that's cheap enough. So as far as disadvantages, Morgan talked about that yesterday. We don't have the availability of insurance until we've been into the system for 3 years. And then at that point, we can apply for a written agreement with RMA. Again, the timing of maturities can be a little tricky, but, and then there's always the need to separate those. And that's an additional expense if you don't have your own cleaner. So touching on the principle of soil armor, in 2005, we bought our first stripper head. And of course, neighbors were, what in the world is this? Looks like a hailstorm hit that field. But we saw some really good things. We bought it, the header, to address additional snow catch, to to address residue management with a disc drill, to speed up our harvest operation and to consume less fuel in that operation. And we've been really happy with that, but what we didn't expect was what a nice layer of armor that leaves on the soil. It looks like kind of a tangled up mess when you're seeding through it. I think this was probably either durum or oats in that photo. And you wonder how the drill can possibly work in those conditions, but after you've gone over it, leaves something like this. You know, there'll be strips of standing areas, but a lot of it is just pinned down nice and flat on the surface, and it reduces water and wind erosion and evaporation and all the good things that soil armor will do. Now, we've tried to eliminate using the land roller quite so much. In this photo, this was a field of soybeans that had been seeded, and we rolled it the next day. It was hot and dry when we rolled it, so it just snapped and crushed those wheat straw stems right off from the crown roots. And then we had a big wind and drifted things over into windrows, and it left exposed soil like you see in the middle. It left windrows of straw 6 inches deep that the soybeans couldn't emerge through, and we left the soil kind of exposed. And it's something that we are trying to eliminate. We don't roll any of our peas anymore because we feel we can cut high enough with the peas. And this last year we didn't roll any of our soybean ground either. We're fortunate, we don't have a lot of rocks, and what rocks we do have, by using a disc drill over time, they stay in the ground. Where we keep the tillage away, we don't lift them back up. We will use the land roller on cattails around sunflower fields. If you once knock the cattails down, the blackbirds are gone. You can get too close to the water. And this last winter, I don't know if you call this snow till or what you would call this. The roller was sitting about 2 miles from home, and it would just happen to be right where the sunflower field was. We knew we needed to get the sunflowers harvested, and we'd had this foot of snow, so I just rolled it back home, and I was like a nice road trucker. So I want to talk about fire as far as soil armor. This is a satellite image. It's a vegetative index, and this is from June of 2017. And if you look along that north and west edge, the neighbor had been burning, and his fire got away from him accidentally, and it probably went just a couple hundred yards along the north, and it just formed an arc all the way along the west, probably 15 or 20 acres. And so the next spring, we seeded it to faba beans, and they came up looking wonderful. They were lush, and they were way ahead of the rest of the field. The very east edge was some kind of lodged over. This had been oat straw in 2016. The fire happened in October of 2016. And the east edge was, we had a little bit of emergence issues. It was slower to emerge. But as the summer went on, 2017 was a dry year, everybody remembers. And that edge of the field yielded probably a third of what the rest of the field yielded. We lost all that armor, and we just didn't have the ability to hold moisture. So fast forward to June of 18, we came back with canola after the faba beans, and the pattern is still there. It's I sure went in and fixed it with a cover crop to get some armor back on that soil, but both the fall of 17 and the fall of 18 were dry. So here we go, 2019, the exact same pattern. So yesterday there was some talk about burning some of these unharvested wheat fields. Boy, I would really discourage it. I would do anything I could to try to keep that armor in place. And if you have to burn, at least address it. Don't make the same mistake I did and just forget about putting a cover in. Just try to do anything you can to get some armor on it. So livestock impact. This half section in the summer of 2016, we had seeded peas on this ground. We had had excessive rain that summer and a lot of root rot. So by July, the peas were pretty well shot. So we We went in, seeded a five-way cover, working with Morgan Jacobs, my neighbor, and we let it grow till probably into the middle of October, maybe late October, and the Jacobs family brought their herd of cows in. This is, as Morgan pointed out, these are the most sought-after ladies in Divide County, right here. Aren't they beautiful? They're just... So they brought their cows in, grazed till probably close to Thanksgiving, and thought it was all good. The next spring, I wanted to seed this field to spring wheat, had the field soil tested conventionally, and it called for just a huge amount of nitrogen and phosphate. And Morgan, as he mentioned, does some custom fertilizer spreading, and he spreads for us. And I was telling him how disappointed I was. I thought, God, this should have showed up. And Morgan, he's wise for his young years, he pointed out to me that we wouldn't see the organic nitrogen show up on a conventional soil test. We should have tested it with a Haney test to see what kind of biological activity was in that ground. So I said, here's what we're going to do, Morgan. We do a split application. We had put down a small amount of fertilizer with the drill at seeding, and we come back with urea when the wheat crop is in about the 5-leaf stage. So I said, when you make that first pass along the north, you do that at a full 230 pounds of urea, which is a lot. And then I said, cut your rate by a fourth, so like 170 pounds coming back. Cut the rate another fourth, down to 115. When you come back again, just go at a 25% rate, whatever that would be, 60 pounds. And then just skip around, and then do the rest of the field at 3/4 rate. So the plan was we were going to go out, flag this because it was going to be easy to see. We were going to have just green, less green, down to yellow, and probably just dead where we had a check, you know. Summer went by too fast. We never got it flagged. We never could see the difference. Maybe there was one point in the summer where we could see the check line, but when it came time to harvest, I told my wife, just watch, see what changes you see as you go across that with the combine. About every 2 passes, that we should be on a new fertilizer line. And she could see virtually no difference across that whole thing. Now, I wouldn't advise anybody to just go cold turkey and not spread any fertilizer after grazing a cover crop, but maybe I could have been in that 25 or 50% level. I think I could have saved myself a lot of money. So we always set goals. As Fred put it, I'm getting close to taking my walk into the forest. But we still have some years ahead, and some of our goals are to try to reduce the use of Roundup Ready crops. The only Roundup Ready crop we're growing right now is soybeans, and Roundup Ready soybeans are really simple. I'm going to miss that, but I think we really have to conserve Roundup for burn down, and I hope I get to a point where I can eliminate that. We need to reduce the acres of peas and canola that we grow alone and combine those. And I realize, you know, we still have one more year to get some history on that before we can take some insurance. But those are 2 really low carbon crops, and they have such a good synergy. And maybe realistically, maybe someday we'll be growing all our crops with either a relay cover or an underseed of some sort. Increase high carbon crops. So since the price of corn and small grains have kind of hit the skids this last number of years, we haven't been growing any corn, and we've only been growing a cereal grain about every 3rd year. And so we've been stacking two broadleaf crops in between. And we are seeing a loss of soil armor as a result. And actually, we're seeing a decrease in our organic matter as well. So we need to figure out a way to grow more high carbon crops. Bringing in more livestock. We hope to working with a couple of different agencies, we hope to put in fencing structure and livestock watering facilities on some of our cropland. And maybe every 4th or 5th year, setting those fields aside and doing a full season cover and hopefully doing a livestock graze on that. And hopefully that will help us to reduce our inputs. I think we've been enabling our soils a bit too long, but we know we still need it in places. And I think that'll just move us a little further down the path of soil health. So the conference is called Farming for the Bottom Line. What is the bottom line? We're seeing big reductions in fertilizer costs. From when I started in 1987, I would guess I'm using 50 to 60% of the fertilizer that I was. Now, could I quit cold turkey? This photo was taken by Morgan, who does my fertilizer spreading, and he had sent this to me, and he goes, "What is this?" So you can see in the photo there's a very distinct line, and I laughed. I said, "Well, that's where my wife shuts off the fertilizer, and she counts to 10, and then she'll turn it back on." And what she's doing is she's making sure that all the seed towers have seed to it. If you have a plug fertilizer tower, yeah, it'll show up. If you have a plug seed tower, you got a mess. So it really shows us that we aren't quite there yet. We still need to be adding some synthetic fertilizer. Now, I did warn her, don't ever do that close to the road again. So we're also seeing a reduction in chemical cost. We're trying to use as little grass herbicide, wild oat herbicide in our small grains, and like in the peas and pulse crops, we're trying to not use broadleaf herbicides. And those tend to be our two most expensive herbicides. So, you know, we've been trimming away at that fertilizer bill over time. And then, of course, we always saw, right away, we saw that reduction in fuel costs and machinery costs. When they talk about a carbon footprint, when we start averaging out what our farm uses as far as gallons per acre, I think we're at about 1.8. So we're happy with that. We're utilizing our machinery better. And then, of course, labor costs. When it comes to our farm, it's just my wife and I. I do have an older brother who's retired that'll come for about a week and a half every fall and help out. But, you know, the bottom line is, are we financially sustainable? You know, there's the things that we need and then the things that we want. And once in a while we need to buy one of those things that we just want. So again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but this is how we do it on our farm, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. Thank you.
We've got some time for Greg for questions. So if we could, right here, Neil.
The guy that custom seeds for me's got a land roller, and he just can't speak highly enough about it. And he says that, you know, he's done some experimenting and says that there's always a 5 to 10% increase in yields by rolling. And I just wondered if you've seen where you quit rolling, if there's a negative effect on that.
I didn't this last year. I think if you've got your soil in nice shape, your residue where it needs to be, I think the drill will place the seed where it's supposed to be. I know there's always that odd seed that likes to get firmed in, but at this point I can't really say that I have seen any yield increases from that. Maybe under harsher conditions, if you mud it in or something like that, but I think I'd probably just increase my seeding rate if I could see something like that happening. Good question.
question is, I'm working with some producers on trying some new things, and you brought it up again as far as the crop insurance and needing numbers for 3 years. Are you able to sustain that because of the rest of your operation being able to insulate that cropland where you're trying new things in order to not pay that insurance or not having to be able to take it out?
I really believe in starting small. The first year, I think we were on the companion crop acres, I think we were a total of 50 or 55 acres. Last year, we increased it eightfold. We were probably 450 acres. And we intend to increase it this year. Now, we've been really fortunate. We haven't had a complete crash with it. I probably will take some hail insurance just to kind of cover my butt a little bit, but you know, those two crops, and Morgan put it best. He said they kind of self-insure because let's pick on Piola, for instance. If it's hot and dry, the peas thrive. If it's cool and wet or just too wet, seems like the canola thrives. We see it even as we go from patch to patch in the field. If we hit a saline spot, there's way more canola there. If we hit a bit of a sandy knoll or, you know, a lighter soil knoll, we'll see more peas. So keep your costs down, though. I mean, and start small. That would be my advice.
How well does that stripper header work on flax, and what other crops are you using that stripper header on?
The stripper header flax is one of its it does a great job on flax. The fact is, if you conventionally cut flax, you're going to end up having to have a rake and burn party, and I just won't have that. It's wonderful to seed through flax. We do have some wrapping issues depending on how your drill is equipped. We had to forego the Exacta spoke closing wheels, but we've used the stripper on any of the cereal grains, you know, wheat, barley, oats. I love it on oats. We have used it on canola, and it seems like every year we'll make one pass in the canola and then go, no, I guess we better just straight cut it. We did try it in the Piola, the peas and canola, but we were probably just a little too late. The peas were shattering a bit much. We really like it in flax. I have stripped lentils with it. That's a little unnerving because you're running those stripping veins right on the ground. But I think that's about the only other crop I can think of. So.
Got a question here.
Okay.
I noticed in your slide presentation that you showed where there was significant yield reduction in the crop from your neighbor burning. And my question is, over that, I think it was a 3-year period, did you notice that you had an increase in weed production in those areas?
Not really. Not really. I mean, we're still using, you know, herbicide programs, but no, I can't really say that it was an increase in weeds. You would think there would be because that armor should be inhibiting some of that weed growth, but I can't say that there really was.
So, how much longer does it usually take you to sort out the seed after you harvest it with your companion crops than it would just to be like put it in the bin?
So the first year we didn't clean anything until spring. We separated the chickpea and flax, and mainly that was so that I could get some chickpeas for 2019 seed. But the yellow peas and canola from August of 2018, yeah, we finally got them separated in December of 19. So it takes a long time. But no, it was just a matter that I wasn't organized enough to get that done. But they store really well together. And I guess it was in December when Isaac Jacobs could make it over to our place. And you know, he kicks them through that mill really fast, and he does just a wonderful job. In fact, we saved, the peas come out seed quality. We saved the peas that we separated out for seed. The canola, they have to do a little bit of tweaking on, and I think my dockage, though, when I hauled the Clearfield canola, and we got a bit of a price kick because it was non-GMO canola, but I want to say the dockage was still less than 3, so that wasn't so bad. But no, with a sieve mill, they separate really quite well because they are so different in size.
Any other questions for Greg? Oh, there's one.
Oh, that's the worst when the neighbor gives you one.
Greg, can you just talk about the importance of knowing where you're at when you start to reduce fertilizer, whether that's soil testing or analyzing years of yield data or whatever you're using to start reducing fertilizer inputs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know, but realistically, I think probably we need to be using a biological test, a Haney test. A conventional test, they're still telling me to put on just oodles of fertilizer. If I use a Haney test, they're giving me some different answers. And the testing company we've been using is AgVice. They're just getting their feet wet with the Haney test. They're pretty cautious about it. I think I need to switch, and I'm not trying to drive business away from AgVice, but I think I need to switch to Ward Labs. I think they're a little more in touch with making recommendations based on the Haney results.
Got one here.
Just out of curiosity, was your neighbor burning on rangeland or cropland?
The burning?
Yeah.
He was burning cattails,
Okay.
and he had disked around them numerous times, and it had been like 2 days before, but he had a little mound of wound up cattails, and the wind came up and jumped into his stubble and then raced across ours, and I'm really thankful that we didn't lose the entire quarter. But we saw it almost as it was happening, and then the other thing we were lucky is that the wind came down. By the time the fire department got out, I think it was maybe 20 acres. So not the end of the world, but really makes for kind of a good example to show that we're doing the right thing.